Welcome back to this week's episode of Real to Real with Lame. This week we're doing the Big Sick. My name is Lex. I go by any pronouns.
My name is Ava. I also go by any pronouns.
My name is Michaela. I go by she, her mostly.
My name is Esther and I go by she, her pronouns.
Yeah, so this week we're doing the Big Sick, as mentioned, which is a rom-com that actually it's based on a real life story between the protagonist Kumail and his now wife Emily, but wasn't obviously isn't in the movie. And it's about how they originally started dating, but they get into a fight about Kumail is from Pakistani, and so there's conflicts between him and his family about his religion and arranged marriage, and that comes into play with Emily. And so they get into this big fight, and then after that he finds out that she gets put into the hospital. I don't know, and it seems out of nowhere, and he goes there, and then he meets her parents, and they develop this strong connection with each other as they're going through this stressful moment with someone they care about. And then later in the film, she has Still's disease, and she ends up making a full recovery. And then by the end, they presumably end up together because it's based on a real story about him and his wife. So, yeah.
We can start with the inciting incident.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, for the inciting incident, which is within Act 1 of the setup and everything, I said that since it's kind of when the protagonist gets a whiff of what's coming in the future, I said that when Kamal is doing his comedy set, in the opening scene, and he kind of looks over, and the Emily, who is just the blonde character that came out of nowhere, when he makes eye contact with her, and from there, when they go and sit at the bar together after his set, I feel that's the moment where we get introduced to this new character. We're kind of seeing a little bit about Kumail's life and what he does and everything, and then we're being introduced to somebody that could be a potential love interest. So I think that kickstarts what the future conflict will be for the movie.
I agree, especially because of the whole her heckling type deal, and how she woohoo, and then later on he confronted her about it.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, I definitely think, because as we know, the inciting incident is when the character meets, it doesn't have to be a person, but it has to be just something that is definitely going to be a main plot point for the rest of the film. And it's I feel it's quite obvious that this is the enticing incident, because it's when he meets the main person that is the main reason for his conflicts throughout the film.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a second option, which might not be A plot inciting incident, but B plot inciting incident, being family values. I have the first introduction of his family, because I don't want to say their main plot. I mean, they're obviously part of the main plot. There are moments where that is hugely important, but when they're introducing him to the first girl we see as an arranged marriage option, is where I had my inciting incident. But again, I had meeting Emily as another option for inciting incident, so I think both work. But for A plot, definitely meeting Emily.
Yeah, I agree. I think another B plot inciting incident could be when in the beginning they're all of the comedians are talking about how there's a rep from the Montreal comedy thing that they are all kind of wanting to get the gig, and it kind of shows his strive for success and stuff, and that's another B plot conflict that happens throughout.
If we also want to talk about that B plot, we're also introduced to Chris, and I can't remember the girl's name right now off the top of my head. She's played by Amy Bryant. Cannot tell you her name, though. I should know this. He told us to know their names and not do what I'm doing, but I know the actress's name, so I'm gonna say it's good enough.
Name, which is
good enough. Chris, but who in the end he ends up moving to.
Her name's Mary.
Thank you. Chris and Mary, who end up being the ones that he moves with. The only reason I want to point this out is because Bo Burnham plays Chris, and I love Bo Burnham, and I saw him in the film, and I was like, it's Bo.
Yes.
Here.
I literally had that written down in my notes. Bo Burnham is Chris.
No, I literally in my notes say I love Bo Burnham so much in my notes as like my second note. So
Yeah.
You guys just like fangirling throughout the movie?
yeah, I was fangirling for sure. So are we gonna just agree that the main inciting incident is gonna be meeting Emily? Because like for obvious reasons, like it's the sort of their relationship.
Yeah.
The next one is plot point 1, which is the point of no return, I believe. Is that correct? Somebody else?
Yes.
Let me know.
I think so. Yeah.
Pulling that out of my. Thank you. Yeah, it is the point of no return. Great.
Yes, it is the
so
point
glad
of-
I double checked that.
Yes.
I actually have 2 ideas for the plot point one.
Oh
So
God, I have 3. Go ahead.
So the first one I had is like Emily and Kumail's fight. Like when she finds out that he's been seeing these women for like an arranged marriage, and then like she like leaves him. But then you could also argue, I feel like, that it could be when Emily's friend Jesse calls him and is like, hey, can you come to the hospital, check on Emily, something's up. And I think that one, I think, establishes a more serious tone in the film. Like the beginning, like it just feels like a regular rom-com, like, oh, silly, but then like, oh, this is serious, she's in the hospital, like, obviously. So I feel like you could argue either one, because I feel like the first one is about their overall relationship, and the second one is about more so like her infection and how that affects Kumail and everyone else in the film.
I also have both of those. Well, I don't have both of those. I have Emily intentionally telling him she was married before as the point of no return, because like that plants the first seed of the fight that they end up having, where he's like, well, you didn't tell me you were married, so like we both withheld information. And she's like, no, like I have in my notes, I was like, neither of them are really right in this situation. Like I'm not supporting either of their life choices right now.
Yeah.
But I also had, again, for one of the B plots, Kumail getting into the finals of the Montreal comedy gig thing. That is definitely a weird subplot that like comes up and then it just like drops out like after he bombs, which like obviously he bombed. He wasn't gonna go to the Montreal comedy gig, but like it just kind of ends, and then they're like, okay, anyways, do you want to move to New York? And you're like, wait, what? Where are we?
Yeah.
But I think that was like the point of no return for that subplot itself.
Yeah. I the point that I chose to really focus on was when Emily finds like the box full of the like marriage resumes from the woman that like the mother's trying to like get him to be with. And I really think like that's like just like the catalyst, because like through the film we see like one of the biggest issues is that argument. The parents constantly bring up the argument, and like how the mother has resentment for him because of that. What's her name?
Beth.
Yeah.
I feel like that resentment like drifts off so quickly, and you're like,
it does.
You
it's
hated
really,
him.
Like
you hated him so much.
Interesting, because like the argument happens, and she's really hurt, and then they don't talk, and then she gets in the accident, and then the mother is really angry at him for like leaving her daughter, and like it. And then, like, just like a little while later, she's like, "Oh, I guess you're not that bad." After
do you want to come back to her apartment with us? Do you want to sit in on all of these doctor's appointments?
Right.
Like,
do you want to get drunk together?
Do you want to get like blackout drunk together? Like what is happening?
Just like, oh yeah, I don't like him. And then a guy makes a racist comment, and then she like goes off.
Yeah, that.
And then she's just like, okay, I like you now.
I also just like going back to plot point 1. I think definitely after Emily gets sick is the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
Obviously, Act 1 starts at the very beginning, and then it ends when Emily gets sick. I have specifically for the end, like 42 minutes and 25 seconds. I know we're not supposed to time this, but like it was like such an important moment to me. It's when the doctor said, I'm gonna ask you one more time, are you her husband?
Yes.
That's like the moment I was like, okay, this is the end of Act 1. We're transitioning into the rest of the film.
Because it really shows like his conflict with himself and how like he really like a part of him wants to be, but the other part is resenting it because of religion and him wanting to be accepted by his family. And it
I
just
think it's also
shows
just
like it. I feel like it shows like both plot A and plot B at the same time. Like
I think there's also like the element of like he said no, and that doctor was like really pushy, like just sign this and we'll say you're her husband. And you're like, that's highly unethical. Esther, did you have any opinion on the plot point 1?
No, I agree. When Emily finds out about the arranged marriages, I
Ah.
think that's like a catalyst for whatever. And also, I think the quote where she says like 5 months of red flags, and she's kind of like,
Yeah.
beating herself up for not seeing this sooner. I think that's also a point where it could be like she's finally realizing what's been going on underneath this entire time.
Yeah.
I think that's a good comment. I'm just gonna say this. I think that's a good comment too, because they never really mention how long they've been together, like in the film directly. That's the only comment we know. Like, oh, they've been together 5 months. Like, yeah, you don't really notice.
I mean, there's like subtle details, like they start dating in the winter and they're wearing jackets, and by the time she leaves, she's no longer wearing a jacket to go outside. I also just like I totally forgot to mention this, and it was just like one of my favorite moments in the film when she's like up at 3 a.m. She's like, I need to go get coffee. And he's like, why do you need to go get coffee? It's 3 a.m. And she's like, I need to shit, okay? And I can't shit in your apartment. I'm sorry, I can't.
Maybe that was the breaking point. That was
the breaking point.
Yep. That was the point of no return.
That was the point of no return for that relationship, when she was like, okay, fine, I'll tell you the truth. Where did they even go? Like, is that her apartment? Did they go to her apartment? She walk in, walk back out, and go back to his apartment? That was weird. Okay, anyway, moving on. We have to go back.
I'll move on to Act 2.
The midpoint is the next event I have.
Okay. We can talk about both.
Yeah, and that's in Act 2.
Yeah.
So like in general for Act 2, it's like mostly about conflict. Like it's very centered around like all the messy stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
I think something that I noticed was like for the midpoint, the original thing that I wrote down was like when Emily's mom gets into a fight with the guy.
That's
the same one I had. Yeah,
that's exactly an hour in.
It literally is. And so
it's exactly an hour in, and you're like, okay, this is the midpoint.
That was kind of a movie poster moment, because before this, we don't even see her talk that much. She's very like reserved because she kind of hates Camille for everything that he put her daughter through, and she just and it's kind of this like funny but also really awkward and uncomfortable moment that kind of like shifts the tone of what's been happening.
I think
that
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I think that just coincides with like all of the stress that they were feeling with the main conflict of point A, which was like Emily being in the ER.
Yeah. I also had, just because like we said, plot point 1 kind of falls when she goes through his cigar box. I had as the other midpoint option him going through her cigar box, where he's like cleaning up, like moving the weed so somewhere that her parents won't find it, which I thought was funny. I was like, that's a choice. But then he opens it and sees it's just photos of the two of them, and he's like, oh, I should fix myself.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you, Esther. That's what I also had written down, because I think it's just all the buildup of like all of these things happening to someone they love, and just someone at the comedy show says something really stupid and very ignorant, and Beth is just like, I can't deal with, like, it's just, I think it's a coping mechanism for everything that's happening, like her trying to fight him, and like they're pulling her. I think it's realistic, and I think it also makes her more human, because like you said, she was reserved at first, and we're seeing this side of her that we didn't get to see before.
It's kind of showing how like Beth just wanted one thing that she could just like hold on, like something she could control, and that was something that she could control, and like just control her anger onto one individual person. but I also want to talk about, so for my midpoint, I said like in general, it was just when they showed up at Emily's house and he started to see how Beth and what's his name?
Harry.
Harry.
Terry. How Beth and Terry were interacting with each other. And he was like, he was just seeing like how they interacted, and then he was like, maybe I should leave. And he like goes to the room, and then like I also mentioned like the box and how he looks through the box and like how it like coincides with earlier in the film.
I want to know so much more about Beth and Terry's relationship.
I
I
do
want to
too.
know everything about that relationship.
I know.
I'm so confused by it.
Because like when he
It's
just
like, what
dropped the bomb later on in the film.
Yeah, Beth is like so nice about Terry, and then Terry's just like, I'm a terrible person. And then you don't know why he's like, I'm a terrible person till later on.
I think that could be a
That's like a C plot. That's like
that's definitely a C plot, but I think like he's like them like and their like marriage problems are definitely like a contender there for like the conflict that's going on, and it kind of is below everything else, but it's still there, you know.
It's definitely a C plot because it's also like definitely resolved towards the end. Like
yeah. I actually mentioned I'll talk more about that later on.
When we get to the end of the film, we'll get to that.
But I do agree that they're like, also I feel like they're also there to just show like a different perspective of a marriage to
the
protagonist.
I mean, but it's also like the same marriage in a way.
Yeah,
because it's like it's obviously not the same.
Yeah,
because like it's like, but she's like, my dad was military, and like everyone in my family went military, and then I started dating this guy from New York, and everyone was like, he doesn't even know how to pump his own gas or something. That's not exactly what she says, but it's like something regarding a car. Maybe it's like not knowing how to switch a tire.
Oh, change a tire. It's
change a tire.
Yeah.
And like her parents being appalled, and her being like, well, there was just like a couple of awkward dinners that we had to get through, but then eventually, like, it's the same relationship, and she's trying to be like, they're bonding. So she's like, our side of the family is good. It's your side of the family that's the problem.
He's seeing the relationship that he could have with Emily, and instead of like the relationship he sees with his parents and his brother and her wife, he's seeing another possible relationship that can work that he didn't think could work before.
I 100% agree. I think there are like so many different layers of conflict happening throughout Act 2. Like I saw a really big theme of conflict with inner self and like religion specifically. I think that's definitely like a B plot thing, but I definitely think like Kumail like contemplating what decision he should make regarding Emily, and like the different women that are, you know, being arranged for him to marry. I think that definitely like plays a part in the stress that we feel during Act 2.
I think sorry. I think we can move on to plot point 2 if everyone else is good, and in agreeing that like the main plot point is either the fight or something else. Beth fighting the guy in the bar.
Yeah, I just want to add really quick that I think it was interesting in class when we talked about how like a conflict can also be something that the film is withholding from us. And I think like the entire time that we don't know anything about Emily's condition, and the doctors aren't telling the family, you know, any updates or anything, and they're kind of like, nobody's telling us anything, that's why they want to move her to a different facility and stuff like that. I think that like the conflict of like the unknown and like how scary that can also be an aspect of that.
Definitely. So for plot point 2, sorry, go for it.
Okay. So for plot point 2, I put it as when Emily woke up from her coma, and when he came in and was like trying to talk to her and like joke around with her, and like at first he thought she was joking, but then she was like, no, like you're genuinely a bad.
You hurt my heart.
You hurt my heart. You make my heart sad. I want my mom. And like it just shows, it's like almost like a second point of no return. Like it's like it just shows like how we expected, because of all this growth he made, and now how he's closer with her parents, and how like he seemed to grow as a person over this time. And then we almost expect as the viewers to like expect to forgive her, to forgive him like we've forgiven him. how we're supposed to forgive him. But then she doesn't. And then it's like, that's like a whole new another conflict that just arises and like comes in. And it just shows how like like we thought the first conflict was going to be resolved, but now a whole nother conflict happened because even though he has changed, she still won't forgive him because she hasn't witnessed those changes. She has no idea.
Yeah, I had that as one of my options for sure. I also had like a couple of earlier moments, like Beth and Terry choosing to move Emily. I only bring this up because it had one of the best bits of dialogue. A burger with 4 slices of cheese. We can't do that.
And then the whole meltdown that he had.
And then the whole meltdown where Kamal is like going through it, and this poor guy who's in every comedy movie, who I don't know what his name is, but every time I see him, I'm like, oh my god, it's you again. It's this guy.
Yeah.
But I had that moment as like one of them. I had a lot of options for this one. I also had the moment where he gets the text to come to the hospital. And while he's bombing his comedy set, because I think that moment also plants the seed for like why Emily comes around in the end. Because like she sees that video. But that's also him bombing the comedy show for the Montreal final. So like that moment was also, I think, for the B plot, the plot point too, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was like the plot point too, and like it like somehow managed to coincide with each other and like work together to be like working for both parts.
Yeah, I had the bag of devotion for plot point 3. That was plot point 3 because that's when I have Act 3 ending and the denouement starting after the conversation with Emily.
I also like how she was like I don't think she was still basically rejecting him at that point, and it's like, oh, like you're like, oh, maybe they'll get back together, and the conflict of her being in the ER is resolved, but there's still the conflict of, oh, will they get together by the end? And it's like
really similar because like again we think, oh, he's grown, and now she's kind of seen it, so maybe now she will forgive him. But then again, we are smacked in the face for like a second time. No, she's not gonna forgive him. But this time she says like, I don't want to be the reason why your family, like why you're not part of your family. So now she has another reason, and it's another whole conflict, and it introduces like the whole other B plot of his issues with his religion and his family and wanting to be accepted by them.
I think the denouement is her going to New York.
Yeah, no, I think the denouement would be like when he actually sees her, because then he like calms down and he's at peace.
Yeah.
Like
I just
when he tickles again.
Yes, Lex.
So I think he mentioned a little bit like how this film like kind of maintains the narrative structure, but it also kind of breaks it at the same time. I think it's more so because this film handles such a serious topic as like someone you love going through something like an illness, and it seems like really happy and funny at first, like a usual rom-com, and then like the shift in tone in the film, it feels a lot really realistic because we fight with our loved ones, and then like something like that can happen out of nowhere and it gets so serious, and we all of a sudden have all of these regrets, and it seems like one day you're laughing with them and then the next day you're hoping and praying that they're going to be okay. And I thought that it did a really good job at portraying that kind of like just roller coaster of emotions.
I agree. Just to bounce off of that really quickly, I think it was interesting because like plot point 2 is mainly known for like a change in direction, everything you know is wrong type thing, and I think it kind of breaks like the narrative structure a little bit, just because I noticed how like at the end of the movie you don't think that that Emily is going to come back and be with him. And like the very end, and we expect when he comes to her at like the party after she gets all better, that they're gonna get back together and that it's gonna be a happy ending just from there. But no, instead it happens in the last like few minutes of the movie. And so I think like it's interesting that everything shifts like very last minute, and that the end of their story is unknown.
Yeah, I think I really like this movie because of how realistic it was in an aspect. Like I liked how like like earlier how we mentioned the coffee scene and she's like, I need to go get coffee, but really she like didn't want to go to the bathroom in his like house. Like that's a very relationship thing I've heard of. But just like I like those little moments where we see like real like things that would happen in real life, and it made the movie feel more relatable and more realistic. And like it just made you like like have the same feelings as the character even more when like they were going through pain, when they were suffering, despite it also being a comedy.
I want to get to our question. For the film, Kamal has the one man show. What character would you want to see the one man show of or woman show of to tell their story outside of obviously Kamal?
I would really like to see Beth's story, because I don't only just want to see Terry and how Beth like came together and I growth in the relationship, because we learned a little bit and I'm really intrigued, but I also just want to learn more about Beth's life, because she mentioned how her family growing up, they were like all military people. So I think that'd be like really intriguing to dig deeper into her and like learn more about her life and how she grew up. And I feel like it would give us like a lot more information on how Emily acts, because I feel like Emily is a good mix between Terry and Beth, and then we can get a good insight to why, like how they're similar.
I think Emily would also have a good one woman show, because she recovered fully from this illness that seems so scary and uncertain, and I think her perspective on it might be like, because she was in a coma, right? And like usually when you're in a coma, I think you can hear what people are saying sometimes.
Sometimes it depends on the.
I'm not
a doctor.
I'm not a doctor. Do not take my word for that. But I think it would just generally be to hear her perspective of everything that's happened in the film.
Yeah. I agree. I also think I think that Asma and Charmine are Camille's parents, and I feel like they have really funny one-liners throughout like the entire thing, and I would love to see like, I don't know, like how they met and everything, and like they touch lightly on it, but I think like seeing them like in their natural dynamic would be like so funny, because I feel like they have such like low like humor that like is just so subtle. I don't know.
I'm really torn between Terry, just because he had some of the best lines.
Terry.
One being 9/11.
Yeah.
I laughed so hard about that. I was like, I've always wanted to talk about it.
She was like, "Why are you laughing?" And I had to explain the jokes to her.
Yeah, I was like, how do you? I've always wanted to talk about it with people.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we get it. But I just like, I want to know his life story. Obviously, he was older than Beth, because he was already a teacher when she was in college. So like, I feel like that aspect of it would be interesting. Also CJ, just because like he's going through it, he's having a bad time.
And Mary, I think Mary would be
funny. Also Chris. Like all of the comedians, obviously
all the comedians would be very to see.
I want actually a 3-person show of the car ride from Chicago to New York.
That'd be fun.
That is the actual like not even a 1-man show. I want a 3-man show of that car ride.
A 3-man show and like a montage, like just all of that. Like that'd be so.
I want to know what that car ride was like. I also just want to quickly say I want to know what Professor Mannon's opinion on this is. Like what 1-man show or 1-woman show he would want to see.
Yeah.
And just anybody else who happens to see this video.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone else.
Right. Well, that was our episode.
Thank you for tuning in.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Please, we need the subscribers. We will pop up again at some point. It's some unknown point for now, but we'll come back to you with a new film and it'll be great.